Did you know that by the end of your life, you could potentially make over 354 million mistakes? I just heard this from Matt Gray and it really blew me away because apparently we make about 34,000 mistakes per day. If we live an average life of 79 years and that's over a billion decisions, right? And if 35% of those are mistakes, then that means that we're making over 354 mistakes. So definitely check out Matt Gray because he talks about this all the time. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about podcasting, and mainly because this is going into our fifth year of podcasting for Casa de Confidence. And certain things are evolving, changing, and I hope you come for the ride. I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm really glad that you are listening to Casa de Confidence, and I'm so grateful. Now, stay to the end because at the end, you're going to get a bonus of all of these things. But I want to go over the top 10 things that I wish I knew about podcasting before I started. So let's start. Number one, the first thing I really wish I knew about podcasting is that it requires you to know what you want to talk about. You can't just decide to have a podcast because it's going to be fun to say you have a podcast, but you have to decide what your topic is. For me, when I started my podcast, many of you have heard the story. I didn't know what I was going to talk about. I just knew that Dan had gotten podcasting equipment because it was the beginning of the pandemic and he knew that I needed something to focus on other than the birthday party I was not throwing myself because we were on lockdown. So this was, a brand new thing that I can sink my teeth into. But for most of us, if we want to start a podcast, we really have to know what we want to talk about. You can't just hit record and kind of have a blank space. You really need to know the topic. You really need to understand your subject matter, or even if you don't understand your subject matter, at least have some sort of outline of the flow of the information or the conversation, whatever it is that you're doing. Now, the other piece, number two, is I wish I also knew who I was talking to. And you've often heard it say that if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. And by the way, I was hoping that the whole world was going to listen to my podcast, and I didn't see why having a podcast wouldn't mean that my sister, my brother, my cousins, or my friends from high school, or people that I've worked with before would be listening. And the reality is that all of these people I've mentioned are completely different. So in order for me to be able to talk about something that they could resonate with, I would have to talk about 100 million things that maybe would not make sense and make it convoluted. So knowing who you're talking to, right? What you're talking about, number one, and two, what you are going to be saying about the topic, right? What is your topic? And for me, I realized that confidence was one of those things that I wanted to talk about. And yes, it's pretty broad. And as I continued, and of course, out of the 304 million mistakes that I've made, you can take this information, right? You need to really be able to come up with that plan. That's the first place where you should start when creating a podcast, or if you're, definitely going to create a YouTube channel or whatever it might be. Learn from my mistakes. Some of my first shows are awesome. But again, I wanted to talk about confidence, but it's in a very broad way. And then the reach that I have for individuals has grown as I continue to niche down my message, as I continue to really define who is it that I'm speaking to. Now I'm looking at my notes, of course, as I'm going through. So pardon me if you're watching this on YouTube and you see me looking down. So number three, there's so many ways to produce, to record, and to publish. So this is the third thing I wish I knew about podcasting. Now, when we started the podcast, Dan did a lot of the research on, how to edit and how to do the tech. Thankfully, I didn't have to do that myself. as I've continued to now not only produce my podcast, but we support others in the process. And as I've been around podcasters, I realize that, there's not one right way. Ultimately, this is the thing that I tell my clients as I'm coaching them in business, right? You're going to have definitely tons of different email services, lots of places where you can host a website, which is the right one, the one that makes sense for you. So if you're publishing your podcast, if you are producing or editing or whatever it is that you're doing, you're going to have a lot of choices. It's okay to try different things. It's okay to get feedback from others. But remember that if your friend who has a very successful podcast or a hobby podcast or whatever kind of podcast is using this platform, it doesn't mean that that's the one platform that will work for you. I just interviewed someone from the Podcast Hall of Fame, and he's been podcasting for over 20 years, 24 years. His name is Rob Green. And one of the things that he talks about in one of his shows on YouTube is that he recommends the script. Now, I can tell you, I have a client that hate the script. I'm sorry, the script. And this is not an ad, and I really wish it could be an ad, but ultimately there's different strokes for different folks. So make sure that you look at different things, see what the functionality is, see what the tech is, see what the gifts or the resources that are available to you are, and then use that. And by the way, I am on my third actually, this is my fourth mic. No, one, two, three. This is my fourth microphone. Okay. And we are on our third soundboard. So what we started with is not what we've stuck with. So definitely try different things or find people that can support you with it. So that's number 3, right? There's so many ways to do it, but there's no right way. There's only your way. And that's the way you should pursue it. Now, number 5, that I wish I knew before starting a podcast is that you don't have to know it all about your topic. Podcasting is a journey, and all of us are going to start in the beginning. The main thing to remember is that as you are beginning a journey in podcasting or in anything, whether it be a business, a new hobby, a relationship, you don't know it all. Part of the process is learning it along the way. Now, you could be an expert in leadership. You could be an expert in relationships. You could be an expert in nutrition, right? But having a podcast will give you the platform to talk about your area of expertise, your zone of genius. But having a podcast will also provide you for the opportunity for you to grow, for you to gain more knowledge, for you to really hone in your skills. So that is another way and another thing that I wish I knew. Number 4, that I wish I knew as far as starting a podcast. Number 5, the one thing you will say, there's one thing that you will say. This is something I wish I knew before starting a podcast. One thing you will say will make a huge impact in somebody's life. You may never, never, never know. And in some cases, people will come to you and say, hey, when you said that, it really helped me. It really touched me. It really fill in the blank, right? And that can go both ways. But make sure that you remember that and put that at the forefront of when you're recording, when you are hitting record, when you are putting yourself in front of the microphone, right? Something that we will say will impact somebody's life and will make a huge difference. So we are tasked with a lot, my friends. So this is something that as I continue to get feedback from people that listen to the show, it's funny how, the other day I actually interviewed someone and they were talking about how they were listening to an episode where I talked about fog and driving in the fog and how I was scared out of my bejeebies out of me, right? Because I was just overwhelmed and whatnot. and how they were in the same space. And the fact that I talked about how I just went slowly, one step at a time and whatnot, it made the difference for them. Now, as I recorded that episode, I was just kind of telling a story. I was just sharing what was going on for me, but apparently, again, it made an impact in the life of somebody else. I've had people also quote me all the time. And I have to go back and say, I said that? Let me go look. So that's kind of fun. But again, what you say will have an impact on the life of somebody. And that's number 5. Now, here's another thing that definitely I wish I knew before I started my podcast. This is number 6. Having guests will help you forge incredible relationships, friendships, collaborations. I definitely knew that I wanted to have some fun guests and hear their stories so that other people can hear their stories, get to know them. But the one thing I underestimated is that the guests that I will have on the show become this family, become the people that are sort of woven into the fabric of my life. I have to say that, and by the way, if you don't have guests on your podcast, you will see that if you are a guest on somebody else's podcast, you become part of this uh, community, this innate community that supports each other. In my show, I've had people from all walks of life. But I can tell you that there's some individuals who I cry with, I laugh with, I share business practices, we grow together, we support each other, we encourage one another. And there are people that I can call on many times. So this family is forged if you're having guests. And again, you're learning some intimate things and that person is sharing of themselves for your audience. So again, this goes back to number 2, knowing what your audience wants to hear, right? Knowing the topics. So make sure that as you're bringing in guests, you not only forge a relationship with them, which you will, but more importantly, make sure that the person that is coming is always thinking of how will this help the listener of Julie's podcast, of Jane's podcast, of your podcast, my friend. So that is definitely something to think about. Now we're moving down the line. Now, here is another thing that I really wish I knew before I started podcasting. Processes are a must. They're a pain in the ass, specifically when you're starting, because you're like, okay, what process should I have for recording, for getting guests, for following up, all of that. It's a lot of multiple things and steps that tie together. But once you set up your processes, it's so worth it because it helps you create consistency. It helps you continue to be a podcaster that doesn't pod fade. You continue to be someone that is bringing your wonderful content to the world. I see many podcasters that stop podcasting. And when I say, well, what was it? Well, I could never find time to record, or it was hard to get guests, or it got overwhelming with the editing. So these processes, and if you don't know what the processes are, definitely hit me up, whether it be the comments or send me a message on DMs on Instagram or Facebook, and let me know because I'd love to share what my intake form is like. I'm happy to share what my processes are for getting guests and how I not only book them, how I get to get them on the show, and what happens afterwards. All of these are very important. And by the way, when I started, I remember it was a mess. Like I started texting people, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? And they would say yes. And I'm like, oh, what time is better for you? And we would go back and forth. And then all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? This is too hard. I'm going to just send them a Calendly link and then they can book and, that's off my plate, right? So it gave me more time for myself to be able to have that process. Now, once people were booking their recording, I realized like, wait a minute, I want to promote this person. I'm going to need their social media links. I need a bio. I need a headshot. And then I realized maybe I need to create an intake form. And I created the intake form, right? So all of these things, again, didn't happen overnight, but I had to make a lot of mistakes, right? And I also consulted a person that had been doing this for a long time. I started working with Pat Flynn and really learned a lot from him and his podcasting courses. So that really helped me alleviate. And now, not only do I have the knowledge and the easy button, right, from knowing what to do with processes, but we've created some of our own processes that fit our podcasting, that fit our production schedule, that fit my business. So again, processes are a must, but they're a pain in the ass. But do not skip that step, because if you do, you're going to be spinning your wheels, my friends. Now, here's another thing that I wish I knew before I started podcasting. It can open doors to new worlds and new adventures. I knew that podcasting was something that I wanted to do. I knew that I had a message, not sure what the message was in the beginning, right? Like I said, but I knew that I wanted to have this podcast, but I never anticipated that having a podcast will allow me to be able to speak in different stages, that it would allow me to, I've gotten press passes actually as a podcaster to be able to attend events and cover those events. Also, I've learned and I've met so many different people that now I, never was involved with certain affinity groups. And now I get to participate in these affinity groups that I didn't know anything about, right? Or there were causes or things that I didn't know were happening in the world. For instance, Stephanie Berman is one of the episodes, and she is a young woman who had gynecological pain. And I never knew. I mean, I always knew that I had terrible cramps, but there are women that are really suffering, and not every medical professional is capable of helping them. And Stephanie not only went out and got the help she needed, but now she has a nonprofit that helps others. There's another individual that I had on the podcast that, by the way, I love them because they come into the lives of women. Most of them are women who they don't know. And if someone is having a real struggle, maybe because they are caring for an elderly parent, or they're caring for young children, just gave birth, or they just moved to an area and don't know anyone, they coordinate women to come in, and this is the Hot Mess Express, in which they come in and they clean your house or support you in whatever it is that you need. So these worlds are amazing, and I've been on an adventure of my life, and I never knew that that would come from the podcast. Another adventure that the podcast has created for me is that now I get to support others. Dan and I get to do this in our business and Casa de Confidence Productions. So that's a new world. I never knew the world of producing podcasts and helping others get in front of that microphone. So definitely that's something I wish I knew, and I'm so glad that I know it now. Now, here's the other thing I wish I knew before I started my podcast. And perhaps, other people are smarter than I am, and maybe they knew this, but I never knew in your podcast can help you grow your business. It can also help you grow in authority. Now, yes, I knew that I could speak on several different topics like leadership, diversity and inclusion, confidence, habits. I knew all of that, business. But having a podcast has allowed me to really be able to bring my knowledge, my expertise to so many other people, right? That probably may not have heard the information and may not have known about certain things that I teach about. And that overall is the same thing for every podcaster. If you have something that you are an expert at, there's going to be someone that is out there. And if you have a business tied to your expertise, having a podcast will help you grow in that business. So I do hope that you see that as well. And if you're not sure how a podcast can help you grow your business, and definitely, this is a no pitch zone. Feel free to send me a message, ask, or book a call with me. I'm happy to tell you. I don't gatekeep, but definitely it has helped me grow my business and brand by having a podcast. And here's your bonus, my friends. Here is a bonus. the community that I built, the fulfillment that I receive from having a podcast, the impact that it's had in my life, and that of the people that have told me they've been impacted. But most of all, having a podcast has allowed me to have a legacy. At the end of the day, I'm not going to live forever. But what I say will stay behind. It's evergreen, and I am hoping that it will continue to inspire, motivate, educate, and make the person that is listening have a journey into confidence, into their dreams, into living the life they imagine, and not sit on the sidelines wishing that their life could be what they imagine, but they really are living that dream. So if you have any questions or thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. You can definitely reach me on all the socials, Julie DeLucca-Collins. If you feel that this has been helpful, also either for you or maybe there's a friend that's starting a podcast or started and is kind of struggling. I don't like to see people who start podcasts and then give up. Let's give each other a hand, share this episode. We do have a lot of resources when it comes to podcasting. Like I said, if you don't know how to launch, what processes, if you don't know what mics and or anything to use, let me know. If you're not sure how to create your message or script a podcast, all of that, happy to help you. So leave me a comment, reach out, Julie at Go Confidently Coaching or Julie DeLucca-Collins on all of the platforms. I am so grateful. And by the way, Dan and I will be hosting a workshop on how to get started with a podcast. Stay tuned for more details, and I can't wait to see you in this journey. Now, if you're not interested in having a podcast, you're just a listener, I want you to go back and listen to this episode because every single thing that I talked about that I wish I knew about starting a podcast can apply for anything else in your life. I promise you. I'm so grateful that you are here, and I'm so grateful that you tuned in. And until next time, don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams, my friends.
Hi, everybody. I know that sometimes we get very lonely in this entrepreneur journey, and I want to invite you to join us into our limited time only Purposeful You Mastermind. For many of us entrepreneurs, we believe that we can do it all, but the reality is that doing it alone only creates a lot of overwhelm. So join us at the Purposeful You Mastermind. You can find out more information by going to bit.ly/Julie's Mastermind. This is going to be the place where you are able to then unlock your full potential and achieve long-term success for your business. Push you behind your current limits, expand your connections, discover new ideas, and implement them with confidence. You're going to get the support in all aspects and transforming you to the six-figure business you've been looking for. Pause and get off the hamster wheel if you've been spinning around. This is a time where you can get that support from like-minded entrepreneurs that are here to join you in your journey. Together, we can challenge the assumptions and land the speaking engagements and opportunities we want to grow our business and make an impact in the lives of people. See you then. Remember, you can find the mastermind at bit.ly, Julie's Mastermind.